I truly think at this point of the season, now that we're halfway through most series, some actually past the halfway mark, I think the opening on a visual level for this is probably my favorite. Like, I think Sugimichi on a song level is my personal favorite, but visually, I love it. I love all the effects and just how it really, like, captures the wild energy of this show. And for an episode that really goes speed running through how they can train their bodies, I mean, I'll never get sick of the Kill la Kill level speedrun recap kind of like info dump. It is so good. And the idea of like changing your body weight, so a character like Paula, who, you know, she's not really physically that strong, but if she increases her weight by almost double, if not triple, she can pack a pretty good punch. And then we learn Hayato, a character who clearly had the ability to become someone very, very strong. Already started out pretty strong, but could end up in that Prontia godlike status. Maybe even surpass, you don't know. Apparently, he hasn't even been punching with, like, any weight. He's been doing what we've seen with, like, literally no strength behind that. And now that he's starting to, like, push past that limit, it's gonna be interesting. Like, do I think we're gonna see, like, Super Saiyan Hayato before the anime wraps up in episode 11? Probably not. But are we going to see some pretty big leaps and changes in his fighting style and probably strength? Without a doubt. I mean, that's kind of insane to me. Like, I always have enjoyed the almost Looney Tune level violence mixed with the absolute brutality. Because, I mean, this episode as an example, every time they're like out in the desert looking scenes, it reminds me of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, right? There's like things dropping on characters' heads, they're going flying through rocks, like it's typical Looney Tunes fashion. Looney Tunes can be a pretty violent show, especially in the old days there, but the difference of like brutality is something that I think really sets this show apart, and I love seeing the color palette in the world just crumble around them, as normally stuff like that would probably open your skull up like an egg as you're cracking it to cook it in the frying pan. But to see Hayato and the others and just how like characters like Prontia are pretty much saying like, oh, I don't believe anything's really gonna change too much, and now he's starting to have to like put on his poker face because he's totally blown away by what Hayato is actually able to accomplish. And you end the episode in one of the, I think, the most entertaining ways possible. You have like this sermon going on where like they're talking about God, what to do, and literally their gods are pretty much crashing the party and they look like demons. Which, don't get me wrong, the demon side is like without a doubt vile. I mean, just look at some of the shit we've seen on their side. But it's interesting how many times when watching from their perspective, they almost feel more like the heroes of a normal story than what I would say the Idatens actually are. Like, there's so many times you'll just be watching certain characters interact and how they're talking. I think her name was Brandy, and how she was, like, talking to her kids, trying to get them away to keep them safe. Well, yeah, there's kind of, like, that twisted demon charm to it. I mean, that's a pretty typical hero scene. And then go over to the, you know, our heroes, our protagonists, and they're just beating the living shit out of each other. There's been, like, a constant formula where, depending on how you view the situation, and if you ignore certain aspects, like the nun as an example, you know, the sister just always praying to God, hoping something would change. Yeah, there's no arguing that's absolutely vile and evil, but there's so many different scenes that you could look at what is seen as the enemy and evil side, and you're wondering, they really could be presented as the heroes in their own story, with a couple of tweaks to the story dynamic and just hiding some of those darker details. At least that's how I personally feel. I actually had a couple of people ask me about, like, what do I think about the sister and why she's seemingly a pretty big influence of the story. I mean, we had the craziness at the end of episode 2, I believe, is when she had her insane shit happen. Last week, I believe, we had another scene with her, and in this episode, we see her once again. I don't think she's gonna be, like, a major character in the way of, like, she's gonna change the entire story, but I kind of like the idea that, like, even if she does become crazy, like, that's cool, but there's something about the idea of having something so extreme happen to her, and rather than just writing that character to have a bad thing happen, getting to see where she goes afterwards, even though she's basically just been in a cell for the entire time we've known her. We've seen horrible things happen to her, almost have happened to her, and then she's just praying to God. I think that's kind of interesting, and I don't see many stories with a formula like this take that approach. Like, they do something bad to a character, and either they get saved or horrible things happen, and then we just move on. So there's something about that. And I think the character design, the personality, I think there's enough there to keep her interesting. So I know some people have been like wondering what's the purpose. Truly don't know. The best I can say is that I think it's just a way to show you that when shit happens, it's not just for shock value, but you know, they are a person at the end of the day. At least that's how I'm interpreting it as of right now. I mean, I'm very interested to see the Demon Lord, because as it stands, it seems like we're kind of like on a neutral territory with them. We're not going to fully pursue it because we don't know the full capabilities of them, but there also is the worry that, you know, should you do nothing, that could cause more harm than actually doing something. But as it stands, do you really want to release the barrier and kind of let all hell loose? So they're kind of at a standstill right now, but the fact that characters like Miku are actually targeting, you know, the Demon Lord, this old man, asking him to drop the information, I think that's going to be like the final big shocker of the season. I think this show started off on the big shocker of like, you know, the nun and just some of the craziness that happened. I think the Demon Lord and what it is there, I mean, I would be shocked if we don't get a Demon Lord fight in some way, even if we don't fully defeat him, because I know it's probably an ongoing source material. I doubt they're going to go anime original with it, things like that. But I think there's a lot to really do to kind of leave us off satisfactory, where we're like, okay, the threat's probably not fully dealt with yet, but at the very least, we pushed them back for now, and we probably believe the characters will be a-okay sort of a thing. Now, I think the training is probably one of my preferred ones that I've seen as of late, because a lot of what we're seeing with characters like Hayato is kind of like that battle shonen like hero formula. You know, they're getting stronger, they're beating the shit out of people. But the way they explain their powers, like, they drop a lot of information that I am assuming was probably in the source material. So rather than just having these dry exposition dump, they're like, hey, we're going to make it funny with, like, this fast-forward nature to it, as we're actually dropping pretty interesting information, and we'll let the visuals do the talking for some of those more meaty substances. Because we don't need, you know, Hayato to cross his arms saying, okay, so now I'm going to make my fist very, very heavy. We can speedrun that and then watch him literally send someone flying. Or even a character like Paula, who normally would kind of like hit, and you would say, oh, she's not that interesting in terms of a physical fighter. Now we can see some potential. And I know there's been some people, myself included, hoping Paula would get some more spotlight. And it's kind of setting it up like maybe she will be, especially at the end of the episode, if that's anything to go off of. And the fact that apparently all of them can do that kind of like either make themselves weightless, which is why some characters can move very quickly, very quietly, unnoticed, and then you have the ridiculous strength of characters like Rin, who are probably turning their fists into the heaviest object on Earth. I know a lot of people probably look at this show in a distance and just see a really fun color palette and a shit ton of action, and they say, oh, it's just like a bunch of characters beating the shit out of each other. And yeah, as it stands, I mean, it looks like our heroes really don't have their work cut out for them. I mean, the seal looks okay, they pretty much have like god-level status on their side that can defeat any enemy. But when you do take a look at some characters and the fact that, you know, it isn't impossible for certain characters to lose, even if it's unlikely, and the way they explain the powers and the way they kind of have this interesting god for human formula and then the demons and the uprising, the mystery of the Demon Lord, I truly think it would be unfair to say there isn't some originality and interesting plot mechanics at play, despite it being driven by its action and animation. Its production definitely holds the interest the most, but seriously, the thing I always come out, like, the first few minutes, I'm like, damn, this show looks gorgeous. But the thing I always appreciate the most is how much, like, characters like Isley, as an example, went from, he's probably suspicious, to, wow, that's actually one of the best characters of the show. Rin had the same effect on me. Pronti had the same effect on me. To see the potential of someone like Hayato, despite clearly seeing a path of being so overpowered, I also see how he struggles to get to that overpoweredness. Like, it kind of covers its tracks and is like the perfect example of an action anime with substance, in my honest opinion. Let me know your thoughts and feelings though, definitely your theories if you have any down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.